We are in the downtown Charleston, South Carolina garden of Patti and Peter McGee. Patti, this is your second Charleston garden. Tell me about the first one and the differences and why you decided to expand on such a grand scale.
Well, thank you, Amanda, for being here. And I had to enlarge because I wanted to learn about more plants. And we were in a lovely little courtyard on Church Street, but it was mostly beautiful walls and paving and very little room for perennials. I did a lot of containers. I was big on window boxes, but I wanted to learn about many new things that I felt could tolerate our heat and our summer issues. And so I moved here. We moved here in '93, so it's been exactly 22 years to the month. And we began by incorporating some issues that I felt this house reflected more for the garden. As I say, Luttrell Briggs has been the designer, and so it was very hard for me to change anything that Mr. Briggs had designed. But with prayerful thought, we put in a square lawn and deeper beds in order to accommodate more shrubs and perennials. And we moved in May and were able to have our daughter's son-in-law's wedding reception here in October. So that was a wonderful way to tie the family and its experiences to this property. And we've had 2 weddings since then, one other wedding, and they've been here every Christmas. So we love this property, but now we're leaving it.
Well, and the tree, the oak tree, of course, anchors the garden.
It does.
And you have had to change as the shade patterns have changed.
We moved here, that oak tree that you see over our shoulders hardly reached over the driveway. It had been planted in the 60s when Mr. Briggs designed the garden for the previous owners. And it was, while it was beautiful, it was not nearly so consuming of the garden, but it has become, without question, the ceiling of the garden, the roof of the garden. And I do take a lot of special care to its health, but it has required me to learn about shade gardening. I thought I would have roses. I have one left.
Well, let's talk about the beautiful area where the table for the refreshments at the first wedding was, which at that time was sunny, but now it's shady, and you've got it anchored by Clivia.
Clivia was a wonderful 12-month, 4-season plant that I discovered before we moved here because it's really handsome when it isn't in bloom. And so I brought some of my containers of Clivia here from the first garden and put them by this pool when we built it after the wedding. And it has just led to, in using more and more shade perennials back in that area, lots of Tricertus, lots of Ligularia, now called Farfugium. I still forget to call them by the new names.
Me too.
Lots of native azaleas.
Native azaleas.
I took out a lot of the Japanese simply because I wanted to have the more architectural native azalea. I have, of course, lots of camellias because that's a quintessential Charleston plant.
We are Charleston.
And Daphne and Edgeworthia, which is a newer one to the garden. It sort of became, and a few years ago we came out with a wonderful new Mahonia called Soft Caress. So I've enjoyed finding those new plants that really love that shady garden.
And I think the strap-like leaves of the Clivia with the wide variety of leaves on the begonias make such a wonderful contrast, don't they?
They do, and they're pretty. When the blooms are over, they're still pretty.
Still beautiful.
All through the summer.
And then you still do, though, have some beautiful remnants of the old boxwood. And tell me about the variety and how careful you are to try to keep it so that it shows that unusual little leaf pattern.
I do. I have brought boxwood from my other garden, which were in containers, and I put them, of course, into the ground. And they were wintergreen, which everybody was using. Then I discovered that Mr. Briggs had used a lot of Harlandia. So I used a few pots of that. Then I discovered Beckett's box, which is, to my view, one of the best, which I think is a cross between Kingsville and Harlandia. And then when we put in these little parterres, I went to the Kingsville because of its wonderful compact habit. And I keep the cross sections trimmed really tightly so you can still see that Kingsville is, by its nature, has a little tight curly leaf, and I try to not let it revert back to the long leaves that are evidence in the boxwood around the edge.
Around the edge.
Yeah.
And even a garden of this size, and perhaps more so, because things are seen on such an intimate detail, require a great deal of time. And when I was looking at the succulents, which are so lovely and varied, and I think when you have small spaces like that, you know, in a big garden that would be lost, Patti, but here, where it's small, you've got that wonderful bird, and then around it, hundreds of succulents.
And an oak tree that gives me lots of time to pick the leaves out of the succulent bed. No, I found the succulents I started with agapanthus in that, because I thought the lily of the Nile, well, I'd get a bloom here and a bloom there. And so about 5 or 6 years ago, when succulents became so available and interesting, I thought I'll put the dry next to the water. And it's been a very happy combination.
And of course, they lend themselves to containers, which is always such a wonderful feature in smaller gardens, because it gives you levels, doesn't it?
It does, it does. And they are so many. You think that because it's a desert plant that it might not be so cold hardy, but as we know, it gets cold in the desert, and so there are lots and lots of succulents that are very winter hardy. I do protect a few containers, maybe more than a few, in the winter when we built a sort of temporary greenhouse for the begonias and some of the clivia and some of the succulents. So I'm constantly moving things around in pots.
You have to have some layers, and of course we've got the wonderful oak tree, but you said that you've become more interested in the Japanese maples because the period of interest is longer than with some of our small trees and shrubs.
Well, the spring, there's nothing like spring in Charleston or anywhere. I mean, we just love seeing that fresh new green, and any of the flowering trees. My dogwood is fabulous, but they only last for a week or two at most. And I just think these Japanese maples, once they come in with their spring color, and I've had a young garden, an excellent pruner, help me layer them a little bit so that they don't have such an oriental look. It's just that they are well shaped. I do believe in pruning. I think it's the most important of the garden arts. And so if you could keep your Japanese maple layered and looking pretty year round, it gives you color spring, summer, and fall.
It does.
Not so much in the winter.
Well, but you love to tuck things in when you can, so you do use annual color when you can. You never have a garden that's just green, although
Absolutely.
you love greens, but you do believe very strongly that color does enhance the garden.
Absolutely. Springtime, you just have to have some I usually have lots and lots of foxglove or digitalis right about now, and for whatever reason, it's been slow this year. We've had a lot of cool weather. But I've had the iris have been pretty. They are perennial. I love salvias because they come late and then stay late.
Stay late.
Yeah. Beautiful. And usually my favorite time of the year is October, when you get those. I have clerodendron and lots of tropicals that once they begin in August, they stay with you for several months, and that's always nice.
Well, Patti, you know what? You're not staying late this year. You're moving on to a new garden, and we have enjoyed our visit with you here, and I hope in the future we can come and see the new one.
Visit me in my new one.
We will.
The third one. I've gone from small to medium to really, really big.
I can't wait, and if anyone's up to the task, my dear,
I'll try.
It is you.
Thank you so much, Amanda. It's lovely having you here. Very flattered. It's been great.